World Autism Awareness Day.
In my head.
Hello everybody, welcome to In My Head. Two quick things. The first, I'm from the United States of America, so if you're from a different country or a different culture, the things that I say here, they may not apply the same for you. The second, I am not a licensed professional. Today, Monday, April 2nd, 2018, is World Autism Awareness Day. You may notice some people wearing light blue today. That's why. Here on In My Head, I give my take on mental health issues, and I wanted to bring awareness to an aspect of autism that's very frustrating for people who are on the spectrum, as well as the people who love people who have autism. That is outbursts. Generally, when it comes to outbursts and autism, the most difficulty and the most frustration comes with children, because children do not necessarily understand their own experience so well. We may have a hard time understanding their experience, and so we get frustrated. And they get frustrated. Of course, though, outbursts are not limited to just children. Outbursts can happen with teenagers and adults as well. When an outburst happens, it can be very tiring and very frustrating and frightening for the person or the child who's experiencing it. An outburst can happen at always what seems like the absolute worst time, like right before you're leaving to go somewhere or when you're in the middle of a public space. But there are some things that you can do to help calm the experience of outbursts. The first thing is to understand that outbursts, they're going to happen. Somebody who's on the autism spectrum may have difficulty connecting with their emotional or sensory experiences. Things can seemingly all of a sudden become really overwhelming all in one big rush. This is part of autism, and this should be accepted. Trying to fight back against outbursts is only going to make things worse for you. To help calm outbursts, before the outbursts even happen, try to find ways that you can communicate. If you're the loved one of somebody with autism, ask them what it is that feels overwhelming to them. You may have to use pictures or examples in order to make communication easier. Before you enter into situations that may become overwhelming, like a big crowd, a noisy place, somewhere with a lot of bright lights, set up expectations. Be very clear on what will and will not be happening and stick to that. And when I say this, I don't mean be clear on what behavior is acceptable and not acceptable, because remember, outbursts are going to happen and they are to be accepted. But be clear on what happens in the setting you're going into, or what your objective is, what you're going to be doing there, those kinds of details. If this is something that you do regularly, if possible, try to make it a routine. Have the discussion before you leave. If this is something that you have trouble with, this might be an area where it's good to enlist the help of a therapist to help with communication. If you're the person with autism, do your best to communicate what it is that you're feeling. Try to look for creative ways that you can explain it. But also be gentle with yourself if you can explain it. Try to notice those internal signs that let you know if you're starting to feel stressed out or angry before it gets so intense. You may not always be able to do that, and that's okay. If you notice that you're feeling stressed, try to take a break from the situation that you're in. Right before an outburst might happen, the person who has autism might start doing what's called stimming, or having these repetitive behaviors such as moving their hands around or their fingers. Some of these behaviors, unfortunately, might be self-harming, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What this stimming is doing, however, is helping them to regulate what they're feeling inside and calm them down so they don't go into a full enraged outburst. So don't try to stop the stimming, allow it to continue. If possible, move to an area that's less stimulating, maybe somewhere with fewer lights or less noise. But only do this if the person who has autism wants to do this. Again, we don't want to force anything. The more that you try to force anything, the worse that it's going to be for them, and the worse that it's going to be for you. After the outburst is over, give the person who's on the autism spectrum time to settle down. If you're somebody with autism, you probably know it can be really embarrassing to feel like you lost control in a public space. It can also be very emotionally draining and exhausting. You probably just want to move somewhere quiet, somewhere that's not so stimulating, and let all those feelings go away. This is not the time to be talking about what just happened and what can be changed. However, after a lot of time has passed and the outburst is definitely something you've gone past, it's moved along, it's not something that's on your mind anymore, that's when you can start to talk about things. If you're the loved one of somebody with autism, do not use judgmental language and do not try to shame them for what has happened. Keep in mind that the outburst has nothing to do with you, it's nothing personal, and it's not something that they did on purpose. They already likely feel ashamed about it themselves. They don't need you to add to that. When talking about what happened, use supportive and understanding language and try to figure out what it is that you can do differently next time to help. If one of their stims is self-harming or potentially dangerous to other people, now is the time that you can talk about that. See if there are alternatives to the stims that they're doing, or maybe modifications they can make to their stims so that they're still helpful, but now they're not so harmful. Remember to be empathetic, understanding, and don't force anything if the person with autism or the child with autism is not comfortable. Since autism can be so incredibly stressful for the person who has autism as well as their loved ones, please seek guidance if this is something that you're having trouble with. Remember that the outbursts are scary and overwhelming for the person who has autism, and it's not something that they're doing on purpose. Don't take it personally. Help is available, and you both deserve to live an enjoyable life. If you're on the autism spectrum and there's something that I said here that was a little bit incorrect, or maybe I could have said it differently, please let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And even if you're not on the spectrum, please go down there so you can learn with me. If you enjoy learning about mental health as much as I do, why not head over to youtube.com/RyanLiberty, go hit subscribe. Thank you for joining me, everybody, here on In My Head. Happy World Autism Awareness Day!